The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is one of the most anticipated games of 2015. And last week I was one of the lucky people who got invited to CD Projekt Red to try it out. And in this video I'm going to show you what it was like to once more take up the role of Monster Slayer and become The Witcher. Now before we start, I do have to tell you that at this event we had to use a controller. They had not optimized the game for mouse and keyboard, and so I was basically told I had to use the controller, and I never use that particular device. I am a mouse and keyboard user through and through, and of course it was a steep learning curve for me. I am basically a total beginner, and it shows. You will see it in the video, in the combat and in the movement. You should be aware that any clumsiness is down to my incompetence and not the game. So, having got that out of the way, let's take a look at the world of The Witcher Wild Hunt.
Let's go!
One of the key features for Wild Hunt, one of the things that is a little different from the previous Witcher games, is the open world nature of the game. And I can tell you now, the Witcher world now feels large. It really does feel vast. You feel like you can pretty much head off in any direction. You can just keep riding and discover new things in this extremely beautiful and quite varied world. There is a fast travel system if you want to use it. You go along to these signposts and you can then travel to any other signpost you've discovered, but I think you can pretty much just keep riding off in a direction and go from one hub to the next hub, so from one sort of area to the next without encountering a loading screen. And that really does make it feel immense. Now unfortunately I don't actually have a lot of footage from different areas. I spent most of the first day in what you would consider the starting area, the area where the prelude is set, and there is so much to do there. You pretty much could stay there for many hours, and so by the time I realised I should probably head off to check out some of the other areas, I'm afraid it was too late to record. It was on the second day. I can tell you there is a lot of variety in the world. I was at one city that was incredibly detailed. It was really, I wouldn't say beautiful because cities are often dirty places, but it was so well done, and it was massive. I mean, it was easily one of the biggest cities I have played in any games. If you remove the idea of zones, sort of a single zone, and that is one of the key defining features of this game in my opinion. There seem to be no loading screens whatsoever, so you're in a city and you travel the whole city, and it makes the city feel so much bigger.
It was always a goal to present as much content at once as possible, and the end result is something we're very happy with. So the most important goal was to not interrupt gameplay with video game nonsense. Let's just give you the experience that you can delve into and forget about everything beyond the edge of the monitor. So there's only loading between the major hubs, but when you're in Velen, No Man's Land, Novigrad, you're disrupted with nothing. You can just gallop from the northern bit to the very south. I don't know how much time it takes currently, but it's 25 minutes, I think, on horseback or something like that. So it's quite a journey, and you will never be disrupted or disengaged from your adventure.
You look like trouble.
Dead wrong. I make trouble go away. I'm a Witcher.
And this goes for when you're entering caves or dungeons, or even things like inns. When you walk into an inn or a building, you don't get a loading screen, you don't get teleported to a whole new area. This area is part of the world. You just walk through the door and you start talking to people in the inn.
Go away, or I'll kill you.
And when you're finished, you walk out of the door, and the whole time You're in the same world, and it makes it feel, well, really connected. You never feel like you left the village when you enter the inn, because you can actually see what is going on through the window if you want to. All in all, the open world feeling I get from this game is not just a vast improvement on previous Witcher games, it is actually a vast improvement on the open world games I've played before. This game truly feels very open, and the game will not restrict you in your movement, at least not in general. It will not hold your hand. It will let you travel to places that will be way too tough for you to actually handle, and you'll also be discovering a lot of places if you do that. If you just travel and look around, you will probably discover so many little villages, so many little places, and so many little quests that you otherwise wouldn't. So the game kind of encourages you to explore at the same time as punishing you if you do it recklessly. Now, it's popular to say that graphics don't really matter when compared to gameplay, and this is true mostly. However, good graphics do help bring the right sort of atmosphere, and Wild Hunt does a great job graphically. The lighting is really well done, the effects are nice, and as I've already said, the scenery itself is, well, it lends itself to some great moments where you just want to look at the world around you and drink it all in. I didn't spend any time analysing the textures on objects or looking for distant objects and seeing if they popped into existence suddenly, but the fact that I didn't actually notice anything like that is a good sign. I never once saw something just magically appear, or at least if I did, it didn't register because I was looking at something else. I never saw a texture that I didn't believe. The entire experience just felt believable, and graphically, that's what is the most important thing. You want it to feel like a real world and not like a computer-generated game. So all round the game looked gorgeous. I was playing it on the highest settings except for one feature, which was the NVIDIA hair physics, and it looked great. The machine I was on was a top-of-the-range CPU, I think it was an i7, and it did use a single 980, but they didn't put SLI in. So either they've not quite optimized for SLI yet, or they wanted us to experience it on a single GPU. And I did, and the performance was fine. There were a few moments where I could feel the frame rate drop below 60, but it wasn't too bad, it wasn't too distracting. And I realised that's a fairly high-end machine, but this was playing on ultra settings except for this one thing, so it looks like the game's going to look good and perform well on a good rig. The NVIDIA physics was disabled. They told me they were trying to optimize it more, but it does have a big performance drop. However, when you enable it, I don't have any footage because I did this on the second day, but when you enable it, it looks great. Geralt's hair looks a little nicer, the horse's hair looks incredible, and if you have a trophy such as a griffin's head, it is amazing with that turned on, but it really does hit the performance massively. You do notice the difference when you turn it on, so when you turn it off you can see it doesn't look as good, but honestly it's one of those things that unless you have a massive hair fetish, you're probably not going to want that particular setting on. It does hit very, very hard, but I have to say it also looks incredible. Now, if they optimize it, or if that type of thing can be passed on to a dedicated PhysX card, the way much of the NVIDIA physics can be passed on, perhaps you'll be able to run with that setting on as well, and it will look amazing. There is a night and day cycle in the game, as there was in the previous ones, and there is a dynamic weather system. The weather does vary from area to area, and it really does change the feel of the game. The rain can make things feel a little more miserable, the sun obviously make it cheerful, but you can go to some areas and find yourself getting wind in the trees that is so strong, it actually makes the trees bend backwards. I don't just mean some nice little sway. You can hear this wind roaring through the trees, and you can see it bending the trees. It really does add an incredible atmosphere. And for a Witcher game, that is very, very important. You need the atmosphere to be right. And the ambient sounds in this game do that. They get it right. And of course, it has a great soundtrack. I've actually got the CD of the soundtrack. I've been listening to it. It is incredible. And it plays the right music at the right time in the game just to keep you exactly in that moment. If it's a moment of danger, the music will reflect that. If it's a calm moment, the music is reflecting that. I really did like the way the game sounded. Movement around the world of The Witcher is very, very well done. It's much better than in the previous games. I mean, not only can you run around, you've got sprinting, but you also have a horse, and you can call your horse at any time. And one of the very cool things with a horse is it will actually auto follow the roads. If you press the button for sprinting or trotting with your horse, but do not put your fingers on the arrow keys, it will actually just follow whichever road you are on and just keep going, which is a really nice feature. But more importantly for me, you actually have a lot more options for just moving around the terrain. And what I'm talking about are things like jumping. You can jump in the Wild Hunt. You can vault over fences. You can climb very, very easily. The objects in game only cause a problem if they would realistically cause a problem. If you want to slide down a hill, you can do it. You can jump off objects. You have far more freedom of movement than in previous games, and it feels really good. And remember, I was using a controller, which I really do not like doing. I do not enjoy using controllers for this sort of a game, and it was actually not that difficult. Moving around the world with a controller was actually reasonably pleasant for me. So I'm imagining once I go to mouse and keyboard, it's going to be even easier. If you are a controller user, if you want to play this game with controller, you can. The movement was pretty easy. And basically, if I can do it, you guys should be excellent at it. And that brings us to the end of part 1. I have shown you the world of The Witcher: The Wild Hunt, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and what it's like to move around within it. But of course, there is much more to a game, and in part 2, I'm going to cover game mechanics. What's the inventory like? What are the potions like? How about the user interface? And of course, the combat.